You're listening to America House Spooky Podcast, our series of Halloween campfire stories to get you into a spooky mood. This episode's story is entitled Black Aggie and read by Claire Manning. Keep listening if you dare.
When General Felix Agnes died, a life-sized bronze statue of a grieving angel seated on a pedestal was put on the Agnes family plot in the Druid Ridge Cemetery. The statue was an eerie figure by day, frozen in a moment of grief and terrible pain. But at night, the figure was almost unbelievably creepy, the shroud over its head obscuring the face until you were up close to it. Their sculpture was so lifelike, it seemed like its arms could really reach out and grab you if you weren't careful. It didn't take long for rumors to sweep through the town and surrounding countryside. They said that the statue, nicknamed Black Aggie, was haunted by the spirit of a woman who lay beneath her feet. The statue's eyes would glow red at the stroke of midnight, and any living person who returned the statue's gaze would instantly be struck blind. If you slept on her lap at night, the statue would come to life and crush you to death in her dark embrace. It was said that the spirits of the dead would rise from their graves on dark nights to gather around the statue. People began visiting the cemetery just to see the statue. Some say the visitors were brave souls. Others claim they were fools trying to make a deal with the devil. That's up to you to decide. One fraternity, made up of either brave souls or fools, decided to make the statue part of their initiation rites. Pledge brothers had to spend the night crouched beneath the statue with their backs to the grave of General Agnes. One dark night, two fraternity members accompanied a new pledge to the cemetery and watched while he took his place beneath the creepy statue. The clouds had obscured the moon that night, and the whole area surrounding the dark statue was filled with a sense of dread and malice. It felt as if a storm were brewing in that part of the cemetery. Like the souls who had gathered at the statue didn't like the irreverent young men. Suddenly, the two fraternity members noticed that gray shadows seemed to be clustering around the fraternity pledge candidate, crouching in front of the statue. What had begun as a funny initiation rite suddenly turned deadly. As the frat brothers called out to the pledge, the statue above the boy stirred ominously and a red gleam appeared from the eyes of the statue. With shouts of alarm, the fraternity brothers leapt forward to rescue the young man. But it was too late. The pledge gave one horrified yell, and then his body disappeared into the embrace of the dark angel. The fraternity brothers froze when the statue turned its glowing eyes upon them. With gasps of terror, the boys fled the cemetery. Hearing the screams, a night watchman hurried to the Agnes plot. To his chagrin, he discovered the body of a young man lying at the foot of the statue. It is said the young man had apparently died of fright. But who am I to decide? All I know is that so many things happened at the statue that it was eventually removed, never again to plague the visitors of the Druid Hill Park Cemetery.
Don't be scaredy cats, guys, and join us as we dive into ghost stories with American Spooky Stories podcast. It's Anna and Claire from America House KU, and today we will discuss in more detail this story because there is one more real story behind it, and also we will go through some of the vocabulary so you can learn new words. And also, guys, I suggest you just to Google Black Aggie and you will see how the statue looks like and what all the fuss is about. So Claire, let's start about the story. What do you think and what do you know about the details from the real life events about this story?
So first of all, it was a new story to me, although there were some elements that were rather similar. rather familiar, I guess I should say. So it's kind of a popular theme, I think, in ghost stories to have these situations where it's unclear whether or not something was actually haunted, or if people were just so scared about the legends of something that unfortunately it led to their demise, as in the case of this story. But so since the story was not familiar to me originally, I went ahead and Googled it as you suggested, not only to see the beautiful statue, but to learn more about the story. Was this real or not? And I was really surprised to find out that there was, in fact, a Black Aggie. There was a General Felix Agnes. All of those details are true, although they were kind of a recreation of what actually happened originally. So this statue was not the original. It was actually a copy of a statue that had been made by one of the great-grandsons of Presidents John Adams and John Quincy Adams. And he made it for his wife, who unfortunately had bouts of depression and took her own life. And so he made this beautiful monument as a sign of his love for her. And it was so popular among people. Everyone thought it was so beautiful that many people tried to recreate it. But it was not licensed. People were not legally permitted to do so. And so when General Felix Agnes came around, he thought that he had gotten a legitimate copy because the artist said he had permission to make it, when in fact he did not. So he did make this statue, and he actually ended up donating it to the Smithsonian Museum, or his family did. I guess he was gone by that point. But because it was not a real copy, it sat in storage instead of being on display. So kind of interesting what elements are real, which ones have kind of been adjusted for the public. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Now we know different sides of the story and you can dig deeper even. Maybe more you Google, the more you know about that. It's very interesting when there is some real life element in those spooky stories, and that's what makes them really frightening.
Definitely.
So now we will learn some new words. As usual, I picked up some of the vocabulary from this story, and let's start from the word eerie. It sounds very cool. It's a new word for me. I guess it doesn't have anything to do with ears, but let's discover what is that.
That's a really good guess, honestly, a great association. So yeah, eerie, as you mentioned, it sounds kind of cool. It kind of gives the vibe that it actually is supposed to portray. So eerie is just something that is strange and mysterious. So it doesn't have to mean that something is haunted or bad, but it just gives you this kind of creepy, strange feeling. Yeah, eerie.
This double E makes it
exact like eerie.
Yeah. And for the example from the story, it was in the sentence, "The statue was an eerie figure by day." The next word I want to discuss is obscuring. The word obscuring was in the story for a few times.
For example, the shroud over its head obscuring the face until you were up close to it. So here, probably we can guess from context clues, it just means that it's covering, it's hiding, it's making it unclear.
Can a person be obscure or too obscure? How can you give more examples of how to use this word?
So for example, I wouldn't describe a person as obscure, but something, a topic could be. So when you say that something is obscure, usually it's something that's not very familiar or clear. And then, of course, as we see in the story, it can literally be when something is covered. I think they also give an example of the moon being obscured. So when the moon is hidden behind the clouds and haze.
Yeah, right. The clouds had obscured the moon that night, and the whole area surrounding the dark statues was filled with a sense of dread and malice.
Beautiful.
Let's discuss the next phrase, from the next sentence. It didn't take long for rumors to sweep through the town and surrounding countryside. So rumors, I guess this word is familiar, but the phrase sweeps through is very interesting. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, so maybe we've heard of this verb to sweep. It's one of those boring household chores that we probably don't like to talk about or do. So just think of it like that. So when we're sweeping, right, it's a side-to-side kind of motion.
And it's the same idea with this. When a rumor sweeps through the town, it just means it's spreading. It's going from one side of the town to the other.
Thank you, Claire, for explaining this. Also, let's talk about fraternity. And this is American cultural thing, right? And when you talk about fraternity, I also think about sorority, and they go in line. So what is that? Because it's not something common to Ukraine. Can you tell, and have you had experience of joining one of those clubs?
That's a great question. And I'm glad that you chose this word because, as you mentioned, it is something that's rather unique to American culture. So this is part of what we call Greek life at American universities. So fraternities are social organizations for male students at American universities. And as you mentioned, sororities are the female equivalent. Admittedly, Greek life was not popular at my university at all, so I don't really have any personal experience. But as it's a big part of universities in America in general, I can at least explain the idea. So as I mentioned, they're social groups, and throughout the story, we heard different terms related to these organizations. For example, initiation rites. So when you want to join one of these organizations, there are certain procedures that you have to go through, certain kind of tests or tasks to see if you're up for the challenge. And the idea is that it's supposed to bring the group closer together. And we also saw this word pledge. And this is exactly what we call people who are trying to join the organizations. So they're not official members yet, but they have expressed their interest in joining, and they're going through these initiation rites in order to become a fraternity member.
In the story, there was pledge brothers for a few times. So pledge brothers are not real brothers. They're just people who want to join this group at the stage where they're not there yet.
Exactly. So once they actually become full members, then as we saw in the story, they can be called frat brothers or fraternity brothers.
Okay, let's go further. And the next word will be from this sentence. The statue above the boy stirred ominously, and a red gleam appeared from the eyes of the statue. Ominously sounds very mysterious. I guess it's kind of in the right direction. So what is that?
You're exactly right. So it's something kind of mysterious, and even moving it a step forward, it's something that suggests something bad is about to happen. So when something is ominous or something happens ominously, it's all about suggesting that something is going to happen and it's not good.
Okay, I hope we won't need to use it often in life. And the next word I want to discuss is the word chagrin. It's even somehow hard for me to pronounce it. So the example. To his chagrin, he discovered the body of a young man lying at the foot of the statue. And so what does it mean? It like the order of the letters here is unusual for me. I don't know why. What does it word stand for?
Yeah, I think this word is probably definitely imported. As you see, it's spelled chagrin. But instead of saying it like a hard ch, it's like a sh, which again is kind of unusual for English. It doesn't follow its own phonics rules. And yeah, so that is how you pronounce it. And it's often seen in exactly this format, to his chagrin, to her chagrin. And the idea is chagrin is this feeling of frustration or annoyance when you're disappointed by something or something has failed. And so, as this example we have here, we see the man who's working in this cemetery is probably frustrated because so many people come through doing all of these silly things, endangering themselves senselessly.
And now the last word, I will read the sentence again and we'll discuss that one. All I know is that so many things happened at the statue that it was eventually removed, never again to plague the visitors of the Druid Hill Park Cemetery. And the word plague, because for me, what I know to plague in, right? That's
a good association. So it's a little difference. Plug, which you just said to plug in, it's actually just plug. And this is plague.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a good association, but actually unrelated in this story.
And what's this word means?
Okay, so this word, I think probably the most common usage of it comes from the Bible. If you've ever heard of the plagues that were sent, there were locusts, there was famine, there was all of these bad things happening, and that's what plagues are all about. So a plague is when you're constantly affected by bad things, you're disappointed, you're worried, you're scared. And so that's the idea. It's never going to harm the visitors of this cemetery again.
So harm would be the good synonym.
It could be, yeah. But it has this kind of even more, it has an even stronger kind of connotation to plague.
Okay, and it's pronounced plague, not
Exactly.
plague, because it looks familiar to
Exactly.
the other word.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you, Claire, for sharing this story and the vocabulary. Traditionally, I will end up with a joke because we had like spooky story and now just have some fun. Guys, be ready that this joke is that joke and it's flat and that's how it's supposed to be. So, know how Frankenstein likes his potatoes?
I can't guess.
Monster mashed.
Oh, the best song for Halloween.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, hope you have as much fun on Halloween as the ghosts who have been hunting your house, guys. Listen to our other stories and have fun on Halloween.
Happy Halloween.